Okay, we are live and good morning. Welcome to another great edition of Account Based Friday, a mobile edition for me, and we appreciate everybody joining today. Each week we have a special guest. This week we have Jackie Leahy, who is an expert at Salesforce.com, Ranger, did a lot of the content for the Advanced Administrator course, a number of badges. We'll get into a formal introduction in a moment, but excited to have her RevOps perspective here because it's such a hot topic right now. And like normal, each week we start off with a poll. And this week's poll was really motivated out of a conversation that I was having with about, I don't know, a dozen or two marketers. We were talking about SDR productivity. And the question was like, how aware are people on the SDR productivity? I had selected somewhat aware, but I have to say, after this conversation, a light bulb moment went on for me. And I felt like I should be very aware as an operator because my marketing productivity is tied to the SDR productivity. And if I don't know how they're operating, I might be wasting some of my marketing programs or marketing investment. So that was my response. I know, Megan, you had a different point of view on this. What were your thoughts?
I was one of the random people who picked other, because if I'm answering for my current role, we don't have a super extensive SDR program, and I would say right now that's restricted more to contact acquisition, some inbound follow-up, and a little bit of outbound. But it's an emerging function. It's the case that they want to talk to somebody pretty senior. And they're also, with our culture, has been historically with the heritage companies that came in to form IT Novarica and RBR, they were used to talking directly with very senior people. So to insert a more junior person into a conversation with a CIO or a CTO of a bank or an insurance company, that's going to be a mismatch in terms of what that senior contact wants to get done. So we have to, I think, be very careful and intentional about how we define the SDR function and where it goes. And if it's the right fit for us too. That isn't always a function that you need. There may be other ways to do what that function does in other companies. So we're working through what that means for us right now.
Yeah, it's like an operations tenant, right? You got to walk the line, inputs, outputs, and just a simple thing where if contacts are coming in, clicking on a specific campaign, do you know if your SDRs know what they clicked on and why they clicked on it?
Yeah.
And so having like HubSpot in Salesforce, their integration has gone much, much better in the last couple of years. And you can actually see what campaigns, the content. So that's my little tidbit. And then the other, my spicier opinion is the SDR function as we know it is going extinct. Exactly for what you said, Meg. Like prospects can self-educate, and they're oftentimes going to be far more educated, specifically with context, but also with the technology piece than an SDR, as we know it, like a year or two out of college sort of thing. So they're going to want to speak to someone far more advanced. So the sort of the SDR as the training camp for tech sales, it just won't be able to be supported exactly because of the margins on that. It just won't work anymore. And the AE, the sales role, is shifting because of the self-education. It's going to be a lot more context-driven and senior and support rather than sales.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's an interesting role for somebody newer to a sales organization, a sales role, to think about if you have to work harder to reach a higher level of knowledge to be useful to that contact, to come in with an informed and contextualized position. It may not be that the AE can do all the homework that's necessary for that. And I hear that a lot. It's, oh, well, we don't have time to do that homework. I'm like, but you don't have time not to do the homework because that person's not going to take your call. So it's a chicken and egg problem. But if you apply, rather than having a more junior person do outbound calling, if you have them doing that research, that homework, that monitoring, and especially if you don't have platforms that stitch together all the information about past interactions, about interests, about current state of that company, that do it for you, you need a human. And that is a great role for somebody at that point in their career to play. They're actually really good at it. And then you have the AE work with them to turn it into a meaningful, bit of outreach. And how are you going to turn that into a call? And you let that person who helped with the research join the call and hear what's being said and how you're engaging. So I agree with you. I think there's a necessary evolution of that role that will better reflect the way that our buyers are engaging. And I also think product-led growth kind of has something to do with that too. If you've got someone who's been using a product for a year and now they're looking to buy, like they need somebody who's ready to help them and talk product. But Jackie, I'm so excited you're here. You and I had the pleasure of working together a little while ago at Winning by Design, and I've always been impressed with your knowledge and energy and just so many good things about what you do and what you bring to organizations. Curious to learn a little bit more about Activate the Magic and what you're doing these days. And then I would love to talk a little bit about your definition of revenue operations and how you see it emerging and evolving right now in B2B companies. You're on mute.
Thank you, Meg. Right back at you. Thank you. Always so supportive, like letting me know when I'm on mute. So what we're doing at Activate the Magic is fractional RevOps advisory. So you can have a small package, a medium, or a large, and it's just month to month. And so if you want to do something big, we can start with large and then shrink down. And the idea is it's really, RevOps is so wide and so deep. It is, you can't have just a generalist, especially once you're past like 10 sales employees. You really need to start tapping into someone who's really good at this, and then this, and then this. And that's just not feasible to have on your staff. But I think consultancy and RevOps it's just a perfect match, because you get these weirdos who absolutely love everything to do with configuring CPQ and like billing and types of things and writing back to NetSuite, whereas like I would be like, please no, never. But anything to do with like building a flow, I'm like, yes, please, right? So you get these obsessed genius nerds, and you're able to plug them in exactly when they need it, where you need it, when you need it. Yeah. And RevOps. RevOps is a subsection of business operations, which is a subsection of operations. It is operations, and I feel very strongly that it should not report to sales or marketing, because it really is the business systems and the usability of everything that a customer would interact with. So whether it's marketing emails or support, how that works and how it integrates, that is all RevOps.
I've got a RevOps question, just in terms of the trends that you see in that definition. Where do you see RevOps playing in terms of size of companies? Like, is it a one size fits all? Does it primarily hit startups? Is it more mid-market? Like, where's the best fit that you typically see?
Well, so what I see is, until you are at, let's say, like 5 million, it just doesn't economically make sense to have someone in-house. I just happen to absolutely love the seed to A journey, where it's like you have product market fit, and now we are going to figure out go to market fit. Absolutely love that. Whereas others love multi-tenant like governance and all the things. I think the most important thing is to whoever you have at the helm of RevOps, make sure that they trust them. And when they say, like, no, we really need an reverse ETL tool, we really need something like that, they're not going to try. They're really working in the best interest of the system, of the ecosystem. And so supporting them in where they're going, of course, they have to explain themselves and don't just blindly trust them. But they get to have the support of maybe more than one consultant or consultancies. Like, yes, we have this, but they don't do this thing. We need this for that. Because it's so deep and so specific and so pivotal, these initiatives, let them be nimble and bring in the people who really have that deep expertise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you can for sure be more efficient if you bring in an expert. You may not need an expert to run it. You need an expert to build it.
Yeah.
And we've got two questions that just came in from folks in chat. The first one I think goes back, I'm presuming, Patrick, to the original part of our conversation about the SDRs. And I think what you were saying is you like a customer success profile for that role. That's a really interesting point. I'd love your thoughts on that, Jackie. And then we had John coming in asking about the connection between strategy and RevOps. So I'd love to get your thoughts on both of those. But let's maybe lead off with going back just for a moment to Patrick's comment about customer success profiles. I think that's really interesting.
Patrick, that's exactly where I see it going. People know what your customers know what they need and exactly what they need. You can give a little suggestions, but that customer success, someone who's really there to support. And yeah, like you say, the profile, like someone, maybe they're not the most competitive person, right? I remember interviewing BDRs being like, where are you competitive in your life? But someone who's really supportive and a different DNA.
Agreed. Would love to have you comment on John's question. Where do you see the connection between strategy and RevOps? How do you see those lining up?
Yeah, side by side. So where are we going? And because you can't know the future and you can't, a lot of RevOps is sort of reducing as much as possible the amount of technical debt, meaning you don't want to overdevelop something that isn't for sure. You want to be nimble, just like in product, right? So just like the product roadmap is really, it's iterative, right? Like, so that strategy in RevOps and product operations, product roadmap really have to be a team, knowing where we're going. And if you've been doing enterprise the whole time and you want to just plunk PLG on, make sure strategy is involved. If not a specific role, but, a set of meetings, an agenda, a consortium.
I've got an interesting question around the RevOps function, and it's kind of morphed here. On one hand, LinkedIn is talking about it being the hottest, one of the hottest areas for hiring, and yet we see some people getting displaced, obviously, in the last couple of months. It's been pretty challenging for a number of companies, particularly in technology. But at the same time, we're seeing kind of the forces of sales operations and marketing operations combine, related to your strategy piece, and combine, I think, also to your point of being more neutral, maybe outside of a sales reporting relationship or outside a marketing relationship. A common piece of feedback, getting a long-winded way to get to my question, a common piece of feedback, though, that I'm hearing from marketers is they're feeling that their requests are second nature or second priority to RevOps type activities. And let me give you, for example, I was talking recently, actually with a former client of mine who was going through this very transition. And he said, this time of year with territory planning, all of my needs and requests around marketing reporting don't get addressed. I have to do it myself. Do you have any insights or suggestions and scenarios like that for marketers, or is that more of an anomaly that you don't see that happening? Like, how do you see that balance of marketers getting their requests in a timely manner?
No, that's classic, right? That's absolutely classic, because even if, so first of all, RevOps is usually reporting to a sales leader, and even a CRO who, like, let's be honest, loves the art of the deal. They're in that position for a reason. Just by nature, if you're rolling up to sales, that's the person who's your boss. And of course you're going to, their needs come first. Even if I am RevOps and technically I'm sales, marketing, and customer success, but rolling up to sales, like, the person who feeds me is sales. So of course they're going to come first. And even if I'm reporting outside, let's say like operation, like COO, sales people by nature are a lot more demanding and aggressive and annoying if you don't tackle what they're like right now. Whereas the marketing profile, just like we were talking about the DNA, right? That the DNA of the marketing team is nowhere near as like hair on fire as sales. And so really it is astounding how much interpersonal dynamics just taint what's good for the company, what's good for the organization. Like, let's look at the entire bow tie. Like, where's the weakest link? Let's do that. Like, in really having that maturity and discipline to keep that North Star.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, John. Does RevOps have a responsibility or role in understanding the outside world or market? Yeah, and I think, Jackie, that's sort of related to your concept of, you mentioned technical debt. I'm thinking of it as like process debt. As you're trying to do different and more sophisticated things as an organization scales and grows, and part of that is keeping up with what customers expect, right? So you may be doing something in a way that made sense for the company, but doesn't make any sense for the customer. Kind of related, John, to your question. I'm curious to know, how revenue operations can keep up with those customer requirements, and what do you recommend? And do you think they need to?
Only if they want to be really great at what they do. And that's not everybody, right? Like, everybody has a cake batter. And sometimes flour more than sugar, right? Everyone has their own taste of what they want in the cake at a certain time. And some people really just getting through the day so they can focus on taking care of their kids or a dying parent, right? Like, sure. Like, just focus on the job. In general, absolutely. Like, being able to tell my clients, please don't do that when they want something. It's like, that's not where the market is going. Like, no, I'm going to push back on you doing these like demo request forms, because that's just going to frustrate the prospect, right? Like, knowing where the market is, where it's going, competition. A great thing that an exercise that like taught me so much when I was at Link Squares. I was hire number 10, first female hire. Really, we were kind of making a product market in general. And so I went to the closest competitor and just copy pasted all of their reviews online, like software advice, blah, blah, blah. And I coded it like different, like, what are people saying? Like, these are the complaints that they're solving. This is why they like this product. And really knowing in the language of the end user, it helps inform. Like, yeah, no, actually, please don't push online contract editing, because in-house attorneys just want to use Word. Don't make them not use Word. Like, knowing Yeah, I think it gives, but of course I'm more of a generalist. So you'll want someone in that role of kind of the hub. You'll want a generalist who's like super interested in what's going on and all the integrating what's happening. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Well, no, this is great, and I forgot to mention for those of you that do have questions, like John and Patrick and others have been doing, definitely drop them in the chat, and we can try to address real time. And I'm going to take a swing at this. I'd be curious, to get your swing too, since you're the residential expert, Jackie. But John's question, great question: who bridges the disconnect between resourcing, quota sales versus potential strategy? You can slice and dice this a number of different ways. I'm going to offer kind of an orthogonal point of view on this. I'd say almost a CFO should be where somebody from a business planning or business operations should be somehow bridging that gap of what does the revenue look like? What does quota look like? Because ultimately, all those costs are going to roll up to the CFO too in terms of investment, of hiring headcount for quota, and the CFO would have the visibility to the strategy as well. But that's my take on it. I don't know. What would be your take on this question, Jackie, just out of curiosity?
I would usually go to the resident Excel expert. Like you said, CFO or finance, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's an interesting one because you want to keep it kind of neutral territory. Revenue operations should be neutral territory. And that's your point when they report into sales. I think they get a little unneutral, but and by design, because like you said, their boss is telling them what to do, and their boss is typically the head of sales. But in a perfect world, they'd be neutral, and the CFO is similarly neutral. Their goal is to optimize the performance of the organization using financial levers, and to explain how the outcome you want to get to can be reached and what combination of inputs need to be present. And revenue operations should be the ones to say, okay, here's how we're going to know whether or not that's happening. So if those two remain sort of neutral, then you can sort of save some of those interesting interpersonal dynamics for others. So the sales leader can work that out with their sellers, but that's kind of my feeling. Do you see that playing out though that often, Jackie, in terms of revenue operations getting to be neutral, or not so much?
Oh, one of the reasons I love being a consultant is I no longer am the nerd pawn in a political war. Like, yeah, I think it's really hard to be neutral, stay neutral. Because in my DNA, I want things to go smoothly, right? So if this person wants this and this person wants this, it's like, oh, well, you two have to work that out. Like, please don't bring me into this Vietnam. Like, no, it's really hard.
Yeah, tell me when you got it sorted, and then I'll make it happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
But then again, revenue operations can sometimes say, okay, what you're asking for is actually not the right way to solve for that, but that's a different thing. But I would love, since as I noted when I was inviting people to join us today, you don't get to talk to a Salesforce magician all that often. And Jackie, you've got some killer background in all things Salesforce and have been part of that community and a respected member of that community for so long. I think a lot of organizations use Salesforce, but most of them aren't very happy with where they are in terms of getting the most from the platform. And just from their concept of how CRM supports the business generally, would love to know, what do you recommend as people are thinking about, how do I make sure I'm getting the most from my Salesforce instance and from how my team is using it and from what I'm asking it to do and what I shouldn't be asking it to do? How do you help companies know when you go in, how do you help them understand that? And what are some resources you'd point them to? You're on mute.
Thank you. So what I would definitely recommend, if you don't have someone in-house who loves Salesforce, if you have Salesforce and don't have a resident Salesforce obsessed human, that's a different story, but I'm sure you do, or you have a potential Salesforce loving human. they don't need to necessarily be your admin or sole admin or anything, but yeah, the Salesforce Trailhead is phenomenal. Like some people have like 8x Ranger, which means they have 800 badges. Like the world is everything that you would ever want to know. It is not gate kept. You can go learn it, including Slack. You can become a Slack certified admin now, and there's that's a whole nother thing that you can learn. There's a really great community called Salesforce Ohana. There's a Slack community. If look for Salesforce Ohana, someone will get you in there. And then for revenue operations, so I'm in both and I love both. Some people are one or the other. And for the revenue operations lover, go to wizops.org and apply to be in the WizOps Slack channel. It is truly, thank God for that community. I wouldn't be the magician you see before you without them.
Yeah. Community is such an important aspect. In fact, just kind of foreshadowing next week, and we'll ask you for one last point of view here, but next week we have Kathleen Booth, who's the CMO of Pavilion, who also runs a community. And community right now is such an en vogue type thing. And just like you had said, Jackie, it sounds like you're learning a ton. And I'm sure you're contributing a lot too. I know you're on another sales community. I can't remember the name of it, of course, but I see your name popping up all the time. So I'm sure as much as you're learning, you're contributing back to the community, which is really the value. But I guess with that, time flies on these things. Great content, particularly around RevOps. Is there any kind of closing thoughts of either a tip or advice for companies that are thinking about RevOps that maybe don't have RevOps? Any suggestions that you might have?
I'm happy to meet with you. Find me on LinkedIn. We'll chat.
There you go.
Yeah, and there's a ton of great content out there. You've got, folks who are passionate about revenue operations, and if you want to learn about it, think about it, and sort of hold up how your organization is designing that function compared to what's working well for others. Yeah, folks like you, Jackie, and others are definitely super knowledgeable about this category. So excited to see it evolve. It's the right thing to do. And thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great to have you here.
So good to see you, Meg. It's so good to be here, John.
And we're ending on a positive note. Thank you, Jeremy and John and Patrick, for your contributions today via chat. And look forward to talking again next week.
Happy Friday, everybody.